Well, today we have two plans. One is to tell you a little bit about how our sacred circles are well on their way. They're so big that we had to split into two groups. We had about 20 people signed up. Now we have 8 or 9 in 2 different living rooms, simultaneously going through the 5 gifts for an abundant life. And all of us explored and talked about and read about gratitude last week. And now we're on to the power of intentions. So how many people are in those groups right now? Lots of hands. Yeah. Oh boy, we're having fun. We learned things about gratitude that we didn't know existed, and had a great time with that. The other thing, of course, is that we're celebrating the sun. We celebrated the summer solstice. Now let's see, today's Sunday, so that was Friday. And if you haven't noticed, there's an awesome moon up there lately too. It's sort of like someone left the lights on all night long. Yeah. So we're celebrating the sun as well. And I started to think about those two things and how they relate. And it's very interesting. For one thing, this concept of gratitude is a kind of celebration, isn't it? And around here, there's a certain type of gratitude that we teach that makes all the difference as far as getting what we desire and having our needs met and being fulfilled. You know, it's not just getting stuff, it's about living well, because we're able to be more present and more whole and more fulfilled. We're able to live and give from a different place when we have that handled. The other thing is about the sun. Of course, not only was Friday the longest day of the year, but it's also the brightest. It happens to be a really excellent time for growing stuff. I don't know about you, but I spent a summer in the Great Lakes region, and I'm not from there, and it was very interesting. It was like out till like 10:30 at night in the summer. Now I understand why there's so much farming in certain places. Anyway, so this is a time of year that is literally great for growing stuff. It is literally the optimal time, the most sunlight. We were just talking about gardening a few minutes before the celebration. You know, thank goodness there's plenty of sunlight, because we seem to be getting a lot of extra rain this year. And that is most preferable to a drought. You know, who is it? I think it was Moses told everybody to go out and dig ditches to make a place for the rain to go. You know, we learn metaphorically that we go ahead and dig ditches and make a place for our good to go. That's part of what we do here. So there are two things going on that are very interesting. One is that we're discovering gratitude is way more than just saying thank you, you know, like you sort of mean it, kind of. It's a polite thing to do. And the other thing is that this is an optimal growing season, if you will. The truth of the matter is that every time of year is optimal. But you know how we respond to that outward stimulation? I mean, we kept the shades down because we wanted to take a few pictures today. And when we have them up, it's so bright in here that it looks like, you know, a spaceship landed outside the window or something. So we've got them down today. But the fact is, it's so bright, it's really hard to be down in the dumps. It's really hard to be doubtful. It's really hard to hold back when the sun is just beckoning you, right? So the other thing is this concept of gratitude that we're talking about here, that we teach here, has to do with something that Wayne Dyer, he wrote a book about it after he, attended a bunch of things just like this and studied a lot of this positive psychology himself. And it was called, You'll See It When You Believe It. Because, you know, the common phrase that we like to share with one another when we're kind of commiserating is like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. So he turned that around and he said, you know what? You will see it when you believe it. And that's the same thing that we teach here. The core of the teaching is that it is done unto you as you believe. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, said, okay, well, that word as carries a lot of weight. And some of you have heard me say this before. The word as carries a lot of weight because, well, it's done unto you when you believe. It's done unto you to the degree of your believing. It is done unto you, as, how else? When, how, to the degree, the quality of your believing, you know. And there are a lot of options in there to just believe once in a while. Anybody else do that? You go to an awesome workshop and you get all cranked up and you manifest, and then it's over, and then you're back to business as usual because your default program is still doubt or lack or limitation or whatever it is. So what we want to do is adopt this kind of gratitude as a regular practice, because if we can adopt this kind of gratitude just like we do breathing or putting on our seatbelt when we start the car, or something else automatic like brushing our teeth, if we can adopt that kind of gratitude all the time, we'll be receptive to our good when we're not at workshops. We'll be receptive to our good when we're not in a class or a celebration like this. Like on Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday, any other day of the week. When you're by yourself and you're in the middle of whatever it is that you're desiring to accomplish, if you have that kind of gratitude with you, there's a possibility that you can manifest what you desire rather than just what's in front of you. So, this kind of gratitude is more than just thank you for something I can see right now. Thank you for what's already shown up. That's easy to say thank you for, isn't it? That was great. Wow, that was great. That's a grateful afterthought. Wow, that was great. And that's a good place to start. Because if you can recognize this is one of the things we're doing. We're all doing little gratitude journals or taking some time each day to focus on what we're grateful for. If we can start there, it brings our attention to the things that we hadn't even noticed or had kind of forgotten about or maybe just taken for granted. It's a great place to begin. So we start by giving gratitude for what we can already see, that's already shown up. The next thing is to be grateful for what we can't see yet, and that's where it gets tricky. That's where we get to have a little practice. The same is true for belief, which is just another form of the same thing. Isn't it easy to believe in what you've already experienced? Isn't it easy to believe in what you've already seen? The answer is yes. What if that's your history? What if there's something that you've already experienced or you've already seen that you really don't care for, and you'd like to stop repeating it? Maybe this practice of gratitude for what you can't see yet and believing in what you can't see yet is just the thing to break that cycle. So once again, instead of just focusing on what's already shown up, we begin to use these tools to focus on what we'd like to have show up, what we'd like to have happen next. So we have gratitude for what's already happened, and we have belief in what's already shown up, and those are easy. And what we're saying is, are we willing to take a step towards being grateful for what we can't see yet and to believe in what we can't see yet? And that is where the discipline comes in. The idea of being a disciple comes from the same word as discipline. They have the same root. All they mean is that you're willing to practice and practice and practice. Any of you who have learned how to play an instrument or do anything at all know that it begins with messing up and falling down and sounding terrible or whatever. But you practice and you practice and you practice until you get good at that thing. And then you even reach some kind of mastery with it. And then it's old news, it's old hat, it's like it's a part of you. Well, really, that's what it is to study a spiritual tool or practice or any concept and have it work for you. It's like, this great minister, Eric O'Dell, did a talk one time about getting liftoff with something like an affirmative prayer and your affirmations and all of that stuff. And he described it as the same way that a rocket needs a lot of fuel to get off the ground and out of the atmosphere. But once you're in orbit, baby, there's no effort there, You just stay in your course instead of all of that effort to get there. It's the same thing with developing a new habit or learning how to use a new tool or do a new thing. Really, it's exactly the same. So if we think about how we'd like to learn how to be grateful for what we can't see yet, we'd like to learn how to believe in what we can't see yet, it turns out that the first one is the key to the second one. Now, I'll give you a little hint. A lot of people wonder about this idea of marching around saying things that aren't true. Does that make you a liar? Or does that make you a believer? It really makes you both, but that's okay. Because lots of teachers for a long time have said, that's what you need to do. You need to have this leap of faith, the Indiana Jones thing. I don't see any surface here. How the heck can I step out, but I have to, because there's someone behind me who's going to get me. You just have to take that step. My refrigerator is covered with magnets that say leap and the net will appear, and fall down 7 times, get up 8, go out on a limb, that's where the fruit is, all of those things. Those are good things to remember. There's another tradition, which is not part of what I study or teach, but in the tarot deck there is the Fool. And the Fool is the most amazing character of all, because the Fool has that faith to take that leap, regardless of appearances, with a smile, and usually bright colored clothing and a bouquet of flowers, just saying, yeah, I know it's insane, but you need a little bit of that once in a while. Okay. So, in some way you've been convinced, whether you just want to be disciplined and master it so that eventually it can be easy for you and you can get to that part where you've embodied something, it has become a part of you, and now it's not hard. Or you want to be a little different and do something that other people have said is not possible. These principles work no matter what your reason is for using them. To believe before you can see is to be grateful before you can see. So we have this little practice of giving thanks before we eat a meal. Do you know you can do that with other things? You can give thanks before it shows up. Here's why. What happens is that gratitude creates a vibration of receptivity. It creates a way of feeling and being that is equal to that thing we desire. When we teach people the 5 steps of affirmative prayer in these classes that we do in Science of Mind and Religious Science, those are some of the names for Centers for Spiritual Living, we teach this kind of gratitude that is the one I'm talking about. If you have just affirmed something that you desire to experience and it isn't in your life yet, imagine that it is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, imagine that it's already so. How happy would you be? Would you throw a party? Would you call a friend? Would you send somebody a text or an email? Say, wow! Definitely how you're feeling would be different because you have that thing. You're not over here longing for it, pining for it, wishing and hoping. You've got yourself energetically in the place of experiencing that thing. If you can master that kind of gratitude, you will be a perfect match for that thing that you desire. And the flip side of that is that if we just master pining and wishing and hoping, and maybe commiserating about how far away our dreams are and our good is, we will maintain that distance because we're using the same power. I took a Benadryl last night. It worked so well, it's still working. Makes you thirsty. So, the same power is operating whether we're giving thanks for and believing in what we desire, or we're doing something else, which is worrying about it, wishing for it, hoping, longing. Maybe you could write a sad song about it, or call your Eeyore kind of friend and whine about it. Find someone who agrees that the world is just terrible, isn't it awful? And let's either go eat a can of worms or just go have cake or bury our miseries in whatever. We find all kinds of ways to do that. But the truth is that we have other choices. The truth is that we have other possibilities. And all we need to do is to try on this little practice. And now is the perfect time to do it. Now is the perfect time. It's not dark and rainy. It's not dark at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. You don't think the day's already over before you've begun. You don't get home from work in the dark. It's light out for a long time. It's for a perfect time to practice this. So I invite you to take advantage of this opportunity that is this time of year that makes it easier than ever to grow something new in your life. To take advantage of how easy it is. And to think of this concept of gratitude in a new way. Yes, it might be a little insane to be grateful for what you haven't gotten yet. And it might be a little nuts to believe in what you can't see yet. But that's what the masters taught. And that's what the masters known as the fools knew as well. So whether you want to access your inner master or your inner fool, heads up, they're one person. You can do the same thing. You can do the same thing. So I'm just going to close us with a little exercise, and this time nobody's going to have to close their eyes. I just want to share with you a little recap. This is also for your spiritual toolbox. Some of us, Frida, you were in the Torah class, and Roland and Judy, anybody else from the Torah class here? Yes. No? You were in the Beyond Limits, and Neshama, Jackie's not here today, we're in Foundations. Anyway, one way that the creative process is described, I've shared a couple times here before, is from Thomas Troward, and it's really, really simple. And it goes with this gardening analogy, so I'm going to share it with you. If you imagine that the creative process begins this way, it begins with emotion. First, the whole train of causation is started by some emotion. And by the way, if this interests you, this is another thing I'd be happy to email you if you just let me know after celebration. But imagine that your emotion is, I think I'm going to start this thing, or I think I'm going to plant this thing. Okay, got it? The second thing that comes from that emotion is that desire. So you say, yeah, I think I want to do this thing. What happens next is judgment. Next, the judgment determines whether we shall externalize this desire or not. You say, okay, I have this feeling, I got this desire, and I've decided I'm going to go for it. That sounds easy enough to understand. And when you read Troward, you know that he's much more complex than that. Next comes a really cool part. It's called the teamwork between will and imagination. Then, the desire having been approved by the judgment, the will comes forward and directs the imagination. Now, the analogy that is given here is that the will is like a guide on a power tool. Can you grasp that? The power tool does the work, but the guide gives it direction. You could even get that from doing visioning, which we just did. You can get that from just being still for a moment and trusting that inner voice to guide you in the right direction. Trust your gut, your intuition. Your will and your imagination work together. The will is the guide and the imagination is the power tool. And together, they can do anything. So once you've decided to go for something, use your will to guide your imagination. You know what that means? That means your imagination can no longer worry, it can no longer not believe it, it can no longer be working against what it is that you desire to experience. It is working for it. You have power there. What is formed is a necessary nucleus, spiritual prototype or center. And the imagination centered on that particular object creates the spiritual nucleus in which in turn acts as a center, around which the forces of attraction begin to move. Do you see how this works? You had something that you felt, you had something that you desired, you made a choice, your will and imagination are guiding together that power, and what happens is that it's almost like a seed or a nucleus or a center for all of this energy to gather around, shows up. And then what happens is you have a vortex of attraction. The forces of attraction call to that thing everything that it needs to be fully realized. Your dream. It could be the car, the new job, the date, the house, whatever it is. You'll notice that everybody and everything starts rearranging to fulfill this need. And finally, once a life has begun to be created, this thing takes on a life of its own, just like a child, just like any new life. It cries when it's hungry. It says, I need something. And you'll know, and you respond to it, because it's a life now. You can actually do that with anything. Anything at all. And some of those things that seem so big, you can't imagine, you just start with one part of it and do that process. And then stand there, look around and celebrate and say, wow, I'm grateful. Look at where I got to. And do it again. And again, and again. And each time you move a little further, closer to your goal. But you don't do it all at once. You do it in measurable steps that you can believe in. And use your gratitude. And use your believing. And pretty soon, you'll be there, looking back over a year, or whatever it is, saying, I did it. I did it. Now I'd like to invite you to close your eyes as we close this up with a prayer. I know and we know that there's one thing going on in this universe. It is all good. I recognize that we are one with it. And so I know that it guides us and guards us and loves us and fulfills us in every way. I know that it makes every dream come true because it gave us those dreams and the means to reach them in the first place. It's all one thing. We're all one thing. Spirit being itself, loving itself, knowing itself, expressing itself, and finding greater ways to express and enjoy life itself. And so I know as we move into the rest of this day with this new awareness, this awakened material in our minds and our hearts, that our believing nature is amped up. Our capacity to see and to believe in greater and greater ways is cranked up. And I recognize that the law of cause and effect and all of the universe can do nothing but respond to that positively, giving us a greater experience. In gratitude for this, I simply release my word. I know that it is already done for each and every one of us. And together, as we open our eyes, we say, and so it is. All right.